Well, hello, and thank you for joining us for Art Sandwiched In. I'm David Madison. I'm the Orlando Museum of Art's Associate Curator of Education and Outreach. And before we begin, I just want to do a quick reminder of some of the features of our Zoom webinar. The participant chat is the best place to make informal comments throughout the presentation. Please say hello. We'd love to hear from where you're watching. And the Q&A feature at the bottom of the chat is the place for more formal questions for our speaker. We'll discuss those at the end of today's presentation. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker. Shawn Welcome is the Poet Laureate for the City of Orlando. He has traveled the US speaking and performing poetry, written NBA commercials for the Orlando Magic, done voiceover work for universities, and much more, including being a docent here at OMA. Shawn is the founder and CEO of Diverse Word LLC, the longest running weekly open mic series in Orlando, which, in addition to open mic, has other creative arts offerings. His poetry can be found or can be described as inspirational, insightful, and thought-provoking with seamless delivery. Thank you again for watching, and welcome, Shawn. Welcome, Shawn, welcome. You're muted.
There we go. Yes. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm really glad to be here and to share this space with those that are listening. So cool. Well, appreciate you all for tuning in. Before I begin my talk, there's a little book that I highly recommend. It's not my own. It's called How Poetry Can Change Your Heart. By Andrea Gibson and I believe, Megan Falley. There's a quick excerpt in here that I think will help contextualize a little bit about the type of artist that I am. Here's the excerpt. It says, "Whoever said that poetry is dead failed to provide the autopsy. If poetry is dead, what a rowdy and glorious ghost. Poetry haunts. Poetry permeates the walls we put up. Poetry startles us awake into our own aliveness. Poetry rustles the hairs on the backs of our necks and chases us into more compassionate rooms. Though it is difficult to change a stubborn mind, poetry can change our hearts in an instant. It's probable that there are more poets on earth today than at any other time in history. After all, there are more humans than ever. And the rising popularity of spoken word has brought attention to the art." And I wanted to kind of introduce my talk with that, given that I am, I guess you would say, categorized as more of a performance poet or spoken word artist, which basically means that, when I write with the intention for it to be performed on stage. Page poets, stage poets, kind of dichotomy there, but definitely on the performance side. And I'll share a few things that you might not find in a bio. My family is from the only English-speaking country in South America, Guyana. So I'm first generation American. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, moved down to Orlando in '93 at the age of 10, and grew up mostly in Orlando with just visits up north, and culturally adapted to our home country's things that we do, curry and roti and parties and that sort of thing. So I definitely like to have fun. As a child, I would say I was always pretty creative. Had kind of that exploratory mind. Wasn't necessarily into poetry, but with my cousins and that sort of thing, I would, try to give people lines to say and like try to do a play for our aunts and stuff like that. But so there was some inkling of that when I was younger, but the maturation of kind of really getting into spoken word or performance poetry, really, I would have to point to my senior year in high school, when I had actually moved back up to New York just for that year. and I was surrounded in a like a hyper creative environment, which is one of the reasons I always advocate if people want to get into writing, you just like get around people that are doing it, like really find those groups where you could kind of see some of that being modeled. You know, you never know what bug is going to bite you, you know? But yeah, I was in that environment in high school. You know, I'm like 17 years old. And a lot of my peers were just doing raps in the hallway, you know, memorizing, you know, all these like fancy lyrics and stuff like that, which up until that point, I had really just listened to music. I always listened to like, you know, rap, hip hop music, you know, Jay-Z, Mos Def, Lauryn Hill, Nas, like Busta Rhymes. I was a typical like hip hop head type kid growing up, but I never really experienced like my peers, like someone my own age that had like that level or degree of talent and just weren't known really, you know, just so long story short, that had a profound impact on me. And I was like, oh, maybe I could do something like that, you know? And so I started scribbling raps and that sort of thing, most of which I don't remember, but later on, this is probably one of the earlier raps that I remember, and you'll see the difference later, right? So it was like, never spitting that fiction, peak my level of diction for miles. Y'all try to run my styles, I'll be splitting that friction. Whistle blow for the pigskin, opposite of a christening, the way I was baptized in lyrical fire. You're listening? Hope I got your attention. Rappers, pick up your pension, dismiss fists and diss you in 6 different dimensions. Blood of an amphibian, flood all of the Caribbean, drink my words like George Killian's trashy equilibrium. You be losing your balance. No one to me is a challenge. Da 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 da. It kind of goes on. It's very like rhyme heavy, very like braggadocio, like look what I can do kind of style. I mean, at 17 years old, like what else are you going to talk about, right? So it was really on the lean towards the ends of like impressing people and really kind of flexing that creative, like lyrical muscle. And so after my senior year of high school, I had this like newfound talent being around all of these other artists my age that were doing this like rhyme thing, which I hadn't done really or taken seriously up until that point. I moved back to Orlando and started going to college, you know, at Valencia. And they had a program called A Squared CS, African American Cultural Society. And they had put on like an event, like an open mic type of event. And a couple of my peers was like, oh, you should get up there. You should get up there. Because, you know, I'd been kind of flexing. Thank you, Mario. Mario put fire in the chat. I appreciate that. And I was like, okay, like I was down for it, but still, I don't say insecure, but just I hadn't performed in front of an audience like in a formal way. It was always like at lunch and that, you know, that kind of thing. And I remember reading something there or performing something because I always memorized the work. And I just got a really positive response, you know, and that gave me a little bit of confidence. And I started looking, I was like, man, where are there like open mics in Orlando? So to give people an idea, we're talking, this is like 2002-ish, the time frame that I'm describing. And a couple of people pointed me in a few directions where they had open mics. Will's Pub was one. I forget the rest of them, but I just wanted to get out and see like who else was, you know, doing rhymey things with words and literary things like on an open mic. And I think that was really my introduction to spoken word, where it wasn't so much rhyme, but it was like storytelling and all of these other elements. Like the literary arts is so broad, you know, and I was able to see and hear artists really doing so much more than rhyme with words on stage that was still gravitating. And so I kind of added that to my own, you know, repertoire and started writing. So I'll fast forward a little bit, 2006, I end up in National Poetry Slam, which is a poetry competition. I was exposed to artists from all over the country competing, super inspired, wanted to start my own night here in Orlando. Up until that point, I felt like the open mic scene was very homogenous. Like you went to certain open mics to hear certain types of work. And I wanted a really diverse palette of creative expression housed in like one place. And so a friend of mine told me about Dandelion Community Cafe, which is no longer in business, but it was their first year of opening at that time in 2006. And they were open to having an open mic night on Tuesdays. And so, yeah, so I kind of started to facilitate my dream idea of having artists from all sorts of backgrounds and types of creative expression by virtue of just treating everyone the same and not um, I guess showing favoritism or leaning towards a certain type of style of performance or content. I really, it's kind of hard to explain how I would create a diverse space other than just kind of being as impartial as I could be as people came up and shared their stories and their creativity in the open mic. So that happened, and it was amazing. Quick little short story, and I'll do a few poems and then open it up for questions here. There was a woman that used to attend. Her name was Lynn Mixon, and in 2015, she had reached out to me. I think it was summer of 2015 about writing some commercials for the Orlando Magic. And of course I was like, yeah, like who says no to that, right? And that summer they had like Orlando Magic has their games, but then they have like these shows where you kind of get to know the basketball player and this and that. And so there was a show, I forget the name of it now, but I wrote like the intro to that show and performed in it before it came on. And then got contracted again with Fox Sports to write like a string of commercials during the 2015-16 season. And that was successful and fun. And I loved it because like I was a basketball player too. So there was like that added like sports dream of me not physically making it to the NBA, but like I still found a way in like through writing. So I asked her later, or it was either in the process or later, like why she'd reached out to me, and she told me that that she'd heard me at Diverse Word, at the open mic, and she told herself that if I ever got a position with the Magic, like as a producer, I'm gonna hire that guy to write stuff. And like it was almost like her dream, you know what I mean, kind of thing. So that was a really neat little backstory, and I always use as an encouragement. Like you never know who's watching, and who's just, I don't know, observing, whatever. Like I don't even know who's on this call. This is like a webinar thing. Like I feel like I'm just talking to myself, but yeah. So that happened. And that's a really cool little anecdote. Another question that I'm asked often is about process. So I know I didn't actually go into kind of where I presently am in terms of performing and style and stuff like that, but most of the works that I do now, I try to get all of the things that I want to say about like said topic down on paper, and then I would try to construct those ideas in a way that is palatable for an audience to hear, right? So a quick example, I was asked to write a poem about the life of Daryl Davis. And for those who don't know who Daryl Davis is a professional musician. He played keys for Chuck Berry. If you don't know who Chuck Berry is, I'm sorry. It's a rock and roll legend. Black dude, which in those times it was kind of like, I don't know, edgy or whatever. Anyway, he used his gifts and talents as a musician to open up conversations with Ku Klux Klan members, really, I mean, in short. And that has a whole backstory to it that I performed at Pashakasha, which is like I'm rambling, I feel like I'm rambling now, but basically I interviewed Daryl and told him, like, tell me about your life, and kind of jotted all those things down and then tried to kind of create something seamless. But I try to insert poems with almost like to try to create like a story arc, to where it's performed in such a way that's really easy to understand, because poetry can be very cryptic at times. And yeah, I just try to connect with the audience as much as I can. So that's a mouthful, but in short, I just try to put my ideas on on paper, and then compose, that's the word I'm looking for, compose the poetry more than write it like top to bottom, stream of consciousness style. And that has helped, I think, in connecting people who aren't necessarily into performance poetry or poetry in general with it, because I'll have like grounding lines that aren't as cryptic, just to kind of bring everyone on the same page, and then I'll kind of continue and stuff like that. So there's a lot more I can say about that I'll, I guess maybe save for some Q&A stuff, but it varies, but that's like the general sense, is just try to connect with the audience instead of like going off into my own world and saying, oh, look how awesome I am with all these fancy words in, and like not connecting with anyone, just like, look how great I am or whatever, which to me is kind of like pointless, What else do I want to say? I think that's it. I think that's a kind of a nutshell before I perform a couple of pieces, and then we'll open up the floor, and I'll do my best to kind of share my perspective on whatever questions or comments you may have. Let's see. I'm going to look at the chat room before I continue. Oh, diverse word, the best of the best, good times. You have an ability to serve them present all forms of media, movies, books. Have you pursued any of those? I have. You captured this one. Okay, awesome. Thank you all for the kind comments so far. So the first poem I'm going to do is called Major Key. This is the poem I wrote for Daryl Davis. Before I get into that poem, I know I said I was going to jump into it, but I feel like this is important. I feel like there's a maturation process that doesn't happen with every artist, but in my case, it has. So when I first started writing, it was really more about just flexing the skill and showing others that I can do it, right? It wasn't as pointed or intentional. It was just like, oh, look at all the paint colors I can do, right? And it's awesome and made me feel good, and other people were impressed, and like that was enough for me at that time. And then as I kind of grew more and matured more, I feel like my writing kind of changed and grew along with it. And so, I would get into more like my worldview, and I would infuse my worldview into my work, right? So a little bit more personal, a little bit more, I guess, inspiring from my worldview, like perspective. And that was one of the reasons I liked the Orlando Magic commercial as well, because a lot of my work early on, at least in this stage, is very spiritual, very, like I'm a Christ follower, but I'm also not hip with the way Western societies have used like religion. Right. So there's just a lot of nuance there, and I feel like that opportunity to do the Magic commercial kind of took me out of the box. To like I can do like I'm not pigeonholed as like one thing, so that was special on that front. And then the third iteration, I think, or phase, I think, of writing is the ability to tell other people's stories and really remove yourself kind of out of out of it, and having a skill to perform other people's nuanced life experiences by way of words, is a real benefit, I think, to society and to their lives, especially if they co-sign it, right? And that's what I'm about to do now with Daryl Davis. So forgive the extra long intro, but this piece is called Major Key, and hope you enjoy. It goes like this. Birthed out of a bloodbath in 1865 over the proposed freedom of Black lives came fear personified. The rolling drum of horses on hooves, white robes with hoods, never traveled alone. Diesel or kerosene-soaked wood, otherwise known as Clan Cologne, the flames, 30 feet high, burning or lighting, a magnificent sighting for hatred, the crash of busted glass, the bricks with no name but one aim to terrorize, to taste terror in the tears of the marginalized, must sound like music, the crackle and pop of fossil fuels, the tune of chants in unison, the crickets singing in moments of silence, the rock and roll of violence, the attitudes permeate public policy and police departments and public parades to the point where a 10-year-old Daryl Davis, brown-skinned Boy Scout, gets booed, stones flew to his face in 1968 for wearing the wrong colors, down the wrong block, didn't know kids was in gangs, weapon of choice became chords and a voice. And as a man and professional musician, he came face to face with the member of the Klan. After a gig at the bar, no robe, just regular clothes, they toasted over cranberry juice and conversation, not me. I don't want nothing to do with nobody who want nothing to do with me, but Daryl Davis, a different breed. Reminds me of Sharp G's. He's got the keys. See, the music speaks. Leaps off the page. You want to talk about change? X said the ballot or the bullet, like marching or the music. Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, and other founders of rock and roll ain't known for shuffling the color line, but they did, causing black and white minors to dance out the booth. The newspapers said it's corrupting white youth. And it was, for the better, though baseless. The question is, how do you change the mind of a racist? Occupy their spaces with a listening ear, like tuning music. Like Daryl tuned in instead of throwing away the whole cacophony of calamity, kind of like refurbishing humanity in the name of rock and roll, jazz and blues, transcending the hues of our skin, the views of our kin that kill, spill into the electric wind when strings and keys tap dance on the face of ignorance, symbols kiss. And love. Like songs create bridges into the next verse, the next chapter is possible when the worst possible scenario is rehearsed over and over again. They shed their clan robes like snakeskin one by one, never to grow new ones again. Because of him. Denouncing white supremacy. See, when black and white keys are played with accuracy, the notes not only create bridges, the lyrics leave a legacy. Those kids protested in 2020 side by side like rock concerts when they used to mix and lose it. So preach, protest, and protect, yes, but please, don't forget about the music. Yay. All right. So that's Major Key. Yeah, it was fascinating when I was talking to Daryl. One of the points that stood out to me was how he was saying that, like when Chuck Berry would play, like there were specific laws, especially in the Jim Crow South, that blacks and whites could not sit next to each other. But when they would play, they're like screw all of that, they're like get up and like dance, and it was like the music was like almost like a social justice kind of tool unknowing to the musician, right? So like there's ways that art can have social impact in ways that it doesn't necessarily get credit for. And so I thought that was just like really, really fascinating. This next piece that I'm gonna do, and then I'll open it up for Q&A, I guess, is this piece is called Vineyards. I always like, I consider myself like an encouraging type of person. And, especially in these past years, we're still dealing with this like rise in COVID cases. People need encouragement as well, and so this piece is kind of, I think, most related to that. A piece is called Vineyards. And if you think about a seed, like a seed when it's underground, it's kind of dark down there. No one knows what's going on. It's just kind of like, I don't know, buried and lonely and whatever. But under the right conditions, right, sunlight, water, et cetera, there's a process that begins. And if we're patient enough and persevere, there may be fruit at the end of that process. So it's kind of like an encouragement to kind of hang on, hang tight, and good things could possibly happen. But it's manifested in a 3-minute performance. So this piece is called Vineyards. Hope you enjoy. When patience and perseverance have babies, they look like lavish vineyards. With ripe green grapes and vines that coil thin wooden fences with the warmth of 1,000 I love yous, I have learned that when seeds are buried, they break, then sprout roots, then break up through the soil to go on to produce whatever fruit nature has in store. But there might be a few that would say, can't fool me with your fancy metaphor. You're unaware of the season. True. I don't know what you've been through, but I'm reminded of this Middle Eastern dude named Stephen, who preached against pompous priests in the Sanhedrin, posed a threat to the wicked status quo, and was stoned at his burial. The village broke down, then broke out into the streets with the same message that Stephen preached, a process of germination. Graveyards always struggle to decompose inspiration. Persecution will work in your favor if you dare to believe there's a beautiful baby girl on the other side of that labor. Don't let this world bamboozle you into thinking abuse will bypass an open heart that's honest and true. It might bury you, but buried seeds sprout roots. This infinite cycle of seedlings produce the most resistant of you, like bamboo. Breathe. Choose to believe the affliction will wither like leaves in season. This is for the future me. And for the ugly past that is beautiful country, with beautiful people who dare to run or read bittersweet melodies of chains that bang like tambourines, turn rusted cufflinks into percussion. I tell you, dancing upside down on concrete clouds confuses the dragon. Children of the light tend to get dragged into cold deserts around midnight in a moonless, starless sky painted on a canvas of despair. But you must know that God is there. Find joy in the hardship, because some will Judas you with the work office. Be prepared. She will tell you she's pregnant with your husband's child while shampooing your hair. Persevere. You will lose your job for speaking out against what is unfair. The gargoyles that swarm the air will try to get rid of you. The stoning of Soraya M. 21 beheaded on a beach in Libya. Breakups and defamation is reserved for the privileged. Inverse the sadness for all that it's worth. It is the pit that prepares the prisoner for the palace. Royalty is costly. Let us cultivate a trend of embracing Braille when buried deep. And it's difficult to see the end, my friend, above the fertile land. It looks like lavish vineyards. with ripe green grapes and vines that coil thin wooden fences with the warmth of 1,000 I love yous. A colorful rainforest filled with wild animals and bamboo. Breathe, cry, endure. Some of us just ain't normal. And for those in the faith striving to be saints, remember, they persecuted the prophets before you. And that is that poem right there. So I hope you've enjoyed. And I am back, and the floor is open, I believe.
That was amazing. Thank you. Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing space and sharing your talent with us. It means a lot.
I appreciate that.
I'm amazed actually that you're able to translate that performative quality of your work to a screen. So I first saw you, I think it was 2018. We invited you to do a reading for our sound space.
Nick Cave?
With Nick Cave.
Nick Cave, yeah.
And I remember, and I had a similar experience today listening to you, with like goosebumps that like came up for me, that feeling of just awe and stopping and pause and listening. I'm just so grateful that you can do the same thing with just a blank screen in front of you.
I appreciate that.
And you know, maybe that is a good question, and I will say, please, if you have questions for Shawn, post those in the Q&A, and I'll be watching that. But maybe that is a good place to start. So we did kind of ask you to participate in that event, and it was really powerful. And you were responding to works or influenced by works by Nick Cave, the sculptural artist. And so maybe, are there other, I know you talked about like the conditions of your environment, of rap, other things that you would recommend maybe student poets would look to for inspiration for their own work?
Yeah, I think that's twofold, maybe threefold. I always encourage anybody, any student or adult, if you're interested in writing or expressing yourself, I think it's super, super helpful to get around other people who are doing it. There's open mic nights, there's even the art museum, just get in a space of where other either artists or spoken artists, visual artists are expressing themselves, right? Like, I think saturating oneself in those spaces is really helpful, because I think it provocates like a type of self-reflection that is always necessary for producing something out of yourself. The other point that I would make is that to never like ignore your own feelings, struggles, challenges, thoughts. We have like really vivid and strong emotions to draw from that we oftentimes overlook or overpass because either it's too scary or don't feel like it can be translated into some kind of art. But I've found, and this is even a point for myself, because I don't even do this all the time, that some of people's best works come from drawing from like a scary place, that is difficult to say, but people tend to be very receptive when you can say hard things in an artistic sort of way. And I think if students, back to your question, can get over the hump of saying, let's use a car accident, for example, right? I was in this horrible car accident and I, broke my foot, couldn't walk for a week. Like there's a poem somewhere in there, about like, what is it not to walk even temporarily? How does one's friend's judgment of you change, even knowing that you'll be back walking again? Or, it's just, there's just so much, I think, that we bypass. And I think the beauty of poetry is being able to hyper focus on like, this is the same, and this is true in film as well, right? You take like a granular story and you zoom out on this like one specific thing. And I think the same can be done with our feelings or our worldviews or things that may seem minute to other people, you kind of blow that up a little bit and say, well, look at this picture. And then now an audience has really kind of a wide screen on something that is small, but like significant to you, you know? So that would be my encouragement for students is like, take those like everyday experiences and write about it. And you know, if you're in an environment where other people are expressing things, you may pick up tools or hear somebody say something a certain way or add humor or, you know, whatever that is fitting of your personality that you may feel comfortable with like sharing, you know. So those would be my
No, I think
thoughts on
those are very inspiring words and great suggestions. I think you're absolutely right to be able to use your individual experience to cultivate empathy. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of poetry. That's the beauty of spoken word, visual arts, is to zoom. I like what you were saying about zooming out, right? To maybe tap into this collective empathy. And I think that's the power. That's the power of poetry to change us, which is what you started with. There was a clarifying question. Could you revisit the name of the author for how poetry can change your heart?
Oh, Andrea Gibson and Megan Falley. Andrea Gibson and Megan Falley. I haven't heard Megan's work. I've listened to some of Andrea's work, and she's a powerhouse. I mean, everyone it kind of gravitates to certain artists, but there's yeah, I'm a fan. I'll say. And here's kind of like a broad thing also to kind of like consider is one of the other beautiful things about poetry is like the familiarity of, well, spoken word in particular, the familiarity of the words. You know, it's like it's not distant at all, you know, because we use the same words every day, and then the poets like rearrange them. You know, we just rearrange them and then create these new feelings and
you
experiences.
Make it sound so easy. You make it sound so easy. It's not that easy. Nobody wants me to write poetry, Shawn. I can assure you. That rearrangement of words, that's the magic of it, and that is how it changes your heart. I don't think it's very. I can see it be very challenging, but
yeah, it's the familiarity of the lexicon, and then you're like, yeah. So and that also, I think, makes it it's accessible. You know, like the spoken word is accessible because you and I right now are having a conversation, and we're not performing poetry, but we're engaged, right? We're listening to each other, and so there's a natural cadence that comes out of us that we can leverage when we're writing. We don't have to jump out of who we are, our essence being, to jump into some other thing, to put on some poetry hat. Like the English language is already poetic. You know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So
well, I appreciate your humility. But I do think there's something, I mean, obviously there's something magical about it. And I feel this way with visual art, where, you know, so many viewers or so many students that we work with, it might seem intimidating at first, but you're right. Like those concrete units of poetry, language, it should be familiar. It is familiar to us. I'm also, I know we've talked about maybe the way that poetry can change us, but I'm also wondering about maybe the changing role of a poet laureate and what a poet laureate is responsible for, what maybe your intentions as the recently appointed City of Orlando Poet Laureate are.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, of course, but maybe what
Thank you.
Intentions?
So this is my personal opinion. I think that the Poet Laureate has a lot less to do with talent and more to do with being like an ambassador and a cheerleader for the art form. I think that's what it should be. When we get into the conversation of the subjective nature of who writes, you know, what, like there's just so much talent in Orlando and across the nation, like across the world, right? So how do you narrow that into like somebody who's like the person, you know? And so hopefully I hope that I would be viewed in that way as my quote unquote legacy is known as being the biggest cheerleader for poetry and the literary arts, you know. Obviously there's some merit that has to come with that from a literary standpoint, creative standpoint, but yeah, I hope to, for people who may be disinterested in poetry, literary arts, like, you know, I hope to be one who converts, you know, people are like, hey, check this out, you know, or maybe you can try this, you know, and I have tools and I've done like workshops and stuff like that that kind of get people, you know, their juices flowing. So I think that the role of the laureate it should be able to balance both like the, I guess, governmental side of
Mhm.
poetry, which is more like opening for the mayor and just being like a decent, like I don't know, being able, like, I don't know, stable's the wrong word, but like you can navigate like a few different spaces
Yeah.
and
The bureaucracy. There's bureaucracy
there's
involved.
bureaucracy involved, right? So if you can do that and still kind of like be yourself and inspire, then like that's, to me, that's the role of the poet laureate. In terms of intentions that I have, I am looking forward to applying for a few grants that are only, well, one grant in particular that's allocated specifically to poet laureates that I wasn't aware of before. That I can use towards creating maybe like a poetry walk or something where we pick like a mile radius or something, and there's checkpoints where people perform or they have their works displayed, and it could be something that's annual that continues beyond my term. That's one like little dream of mine. The other is doing some sort of like literary arts festival, like a 2-day thing where it's like comic books and poetry and literature and children's storytelling and like basically like all the other festivals we do, but the range of it would just be literary arts focus, and it could be something that if we get it, you know, funding can be done like every year, and something that people look forward to, similar to the Miami Book Fair. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's like all things literary. It could be a station where people are playing like Scrabble and Taboo and, you know, all of the word things. And I think from an educational standpoint and just a social impact standpoint, that would be a really cool project to invest in. So those are only like main plans that I have, other than just being myself and sharing and cheerleading. So
Well, you have your hands in a lot of different pots.
I
Really.
do.
You are always so busy.
Speaking of which, shameless plug, Steinmets Hall grand opening is this Friday, and I wrote the script for the beginning and ending of it, and I'm performing there. So if you haven't gotten tickets or you hadn't heard of it, of course, your own safety feeling around the rising numbers in COVID. Obviously, I understand that, but yeah, shameless plug. That'll be, I think, 7:30 is showtime, but you can go to the Dr. Phillips Center's website and get tickets this Friday, and that'll be a lot of fun. So
Is that the show that Cole B. Smith is producing?
yeah,
Okay.
yes, yeah, yeah. Cole, myself, Ardana Tawari worked on creating some of that, so it'll be fun.
Veronica is asking, what are some of the more important aspects of the Orlando poetry community that have influenced you?
Yeah, can I pause real quick? My laptop is on a thread. I will be back in like
Yeah,
20
yeah.
seconds. Let me get my charger. Let me get my charger.
Well, I will say, I'll take the time to shamelessly plug that our next Art Sandwich Den is going to be with the director of the Renaissance Theater, the new theater space here in Lock Haven Park, Donald Roop. He's going to be speaking on February 9th. So please join us. That will also be a webinar style. And I'll continue to entertain here. We have so many things going on at OMA.
You could have did a whole poem. You could have did a whole poem,
David. The poetry community, maybe some of the big things that you've taken away.
I'm sorry. What's the question?
What are some of the aspects of the poetry community in Orlando that have influenced you or been important to you?
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, I mean, certainly Diverse Word, that's an open mic night. This semester and next semester, I'm speaking in school terms because I'm in grad school right now as well. I'm not hosting. I have other hosts that are hosting for me the open mic presently. But yeah, being around other um, Orlando residents, Central Florida residents that are just sharing their poetry has always been inspiring for me. Um, yeah, I think yeah, just being around good energy and good people. So but I am kind of pigeonholed to that night, right? So I don't go to a lot of different open mic series. I'm aware of them, and I may pop in every now and again, but there's just too much going on in my life to be all over the place. And so in terms of poetry community, that is kind of bottlenecked in what I experience at Diverse Word, which is at downtown Credo, North Quarter. I don't know if you're familiar with Ben Hoyer. He has the Credo coffee shops. There's two venues for that. One is by the Advent Hospital, but there's one on North Orange Avenue, and that's where I have shifted the open mic from Dandelion Cafe. It's now there. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that question. Just being around people who share and perform and sing and do comedy.
Love it. Yeah, it's all about the community.
Mhm.
I have one last question for you, and we
Sure.
close. Even beyond the Poet Laureate, and I think you do so much. I didn't know about grad school. Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
You do so much. You've accomplished so much as well. Maybe what is one dream that you have yet to realize?
um, I guess graduating. I haven't graduated yet. So
Good
summer
answer.
2022, when I do my master's thesis, that'll be a good accomplishment. I think, yeah, I really do walk into opportunities as they present themselves. Um, I'm not, no, I take that back. I am pushing for something. So a dream for me would be to create infrastructure to where more artists like myself can get paid, you know? Like it's such a unique space. It's not like music. It's not like it's not really mainstream palatable unless you combine it with like another art form, I think. And if even like, sharing your poetry is performed like I do, there's still limited like opportunities. So I want to get into a space where I'm either like coaching, training, creating space where I have like a database of artists and I'm working with them. And like if there's organizations that are looking for performance poetry or someone to create specific content, like there's like a one portal access pool, and that becomes like an economic engine for people who do like what I do, you know what I mean? To complement whatever else other jobs they're doing. But I think that has, I mean, I consider myself fortunate and blessed to kind of find my way through those waters and be in a space where people know me more than they have before. And I'm kind of like an easy name to call on when people think about spoken word poetry. But there's so many more people like myself who people don't know. And I'm like, I have a little bit of a responsibility there, I think, to kind of open up some doors. So I think that'll be the main thing. Yeah.
That's a beautiful vision. I like this like incubator that you can help
Yeah. Yeah.
guide. Yeah, I think that's important. Well, Shawn, thank you so much. I'm so excited. And again, congratulations on being the City of Orlando's Poet Laureate. I'm
Thank
excited.
you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. And thank you for spending time with us. And thanks to everyone who watched today's program. It was recorded. You'll receive the link in your email tomorrow. So thank you again and have a great day, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there.